I bought 60 acres of raw Oklahoma land free and clear, and before the dust from the closing had even settled, a woman in a rhinestone sun visor rolled up to my gate to tell me I'd made a terrible mistake. Not because I broke a law, not because I touched 1 inch of her property, but because I had interrupted her precious 4-minute shortcut to Pilates. That was the day I learned some people don't think land belongs to whoever paid for it. They think it belongs to whoever's gotten away with using it the longest. My name's Garrett Wolf. I'm 51. I've got a bad shoulder when the weather turns and a pickup with a cracked dashboard I've never bothered fixing because honestly it feels like part of the family at this point. For most of my adult life, I worked pipeline jobs out of Tulsa, long stretches away from home, motel coffee, steel-toe boots, red dirt baked into everything I owned. That kind of life will give you a decent living, but it'll also take bites out of everything else. My marriage didn't survive it. By the time the divorce was done, I was tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. So I made myself one promise: I was going to buy land. Real land. Not one of those tidy little subdivision boxes where your neighbors can practically hear you sneeze and some HOA sends you a warning letter because your trash cans were visible for 11 minutes too long. I wanted room, quiet sky dirt under my boots and the right to sit on my own porch without somebody's committee deciding whether my chair cushions matched community standards. I searched for 2 years before I found the Kavanaugh parcel, 62 acres of eastern Oklahoma hill country, sitting just outside Sycamore Ridge, one of those master-planned communities that looked polished from the road and smelled faintly of control the second you got close. My land had a seasonal creek along the south edge, thick stands of post oak, and a legal gravel road easement off County Road 7 that gave me access without crossing a single inch of HOA property. I checked everything: title surveys, county records, zoning, easements. I did my homework the way men do when they've spent too many years learning what happens when you trust someone else's version of the truth. I closed in March. Paid a little above average for the acreage, but I didn't care. The first time I stood out there alone after signing the papers, the place smelled like red clay diesel from my truck and wild onion after a light rain. It reached right into my chest and pulled something loose. I remember thinking, this is mine. Finally, absolutely mine. I started spending weekends out there camping first, then sketching plans for a barnuminium steel frame spray, foam big east-facing porch so I could drink coffee at sunrise and hear the creek when it was running. I was measuring for a gate one Saturday morning when Delane Moorcraft arrived. Pearl white Escalade, HOA magnet on the door, khaki slacks sharp enough to cut paper, bedazzled visor catching the light like she thought she was stepping onto a stage instead of onto somebody else's dirt. She got out wearing that perfume cloud that had no business being anywhere near red clay country. Looked at the old fence gap, then looked at me like I was a teenager she'd caught misbehaving. She didn't ask a question. She informed me that several Sycamore Ridge residents had been using that gap in the fence for 15 years to cut across the corner of this parcel and reach the back entrance to the community. Said old Walt, the previous owner, had never minded. Said it was basically an informal easement by now. I set down my tape measure and said, "No, ma'am, it's trespassing." She smiled slow and polished the kind of smile people wear when they've spent years confusing intimidation with authority. "I'm the president of the Sycamore Ridge HOA, she said. "We have legal counsel. We have resources. I'd encourage you to think very carefully before you make this community unhappy." I looked at the marked post holes, then back at her and said, "Gate goes up Friday." That smile faltered for maybe half a second, just enough for me to know she wasn't used to being told no. Then she got back in that Escalade and left a little trail of dust behind her, like the whole performance needed a curtain close. The gate went up Friday exactly like I said. Heavy steel farm gate chain padlock posts, set in concrete, nothing fancy yet, just solid. By the time I locked it and headed back to Tulsa, I felt like I'd ended a sentence that had been hanging open for years. By Monday, she'd filed a complaint with the county claiming my gate obstructed an informal public right-of-way, which is lawyerly nonsense. For I'm mad, my shortcut is gone. The county planner called me polite as can be, and I walked him through the records. No recorded easement, no public designation, no nothing. Complaint died right there. That should have been the end of it. But people like Delene don't stop when they're wrong. They stop when they hit a wall hard enough to feel it. The next Saturday, I rolled up to the property and found my padlock cut clean through gate standing open. Fresh tire marks pressed deep into the shoulder where the ground was still soft from rain. The broken lock was lying in the gravel like a dare. Morning air was cool mockingbird up in the oaks just singing its fool head off, and I stood there feeling that particular kind of anger that gets real quiet before it gets useful. I photographed everything: angles, timestamps, tracks, coordinates. Then I drove straight to the sheriff's substation and filed a report. Deputy Holloway, weathered face, no wasted words, looked over my pictures and asked if I had cameras. "Not yet," I said. "You might want some," he told me. Best advice I got all spring. I ordered trail cams that same day, motion-triggered infrared wireless, upload the whole setup. While I was at it, I upgraded the gate plan. If Deline wanted symbolism, I was happy to give it to her. I hired a fencing contractor out of Muskogee and had a heavier steel swing gate installed with a solar-powered actuator keypad backup lock, deep-set reinforced posts. The kind of gate that doesn't just say private property, it says try me and regret it. 2 weeks later, the cameras caught their first star. Tuesday evening, golden hour, shadows, stretching long across the entrance. A silver F250 pulls up. Man gets out wearing a Sycamore Ridge polo bolt cutters in hand, face plain as day on camera. Cuts the backup chain forces, the gate drives through, comes back 20 minutes later, leaves it hanging open behind him like he's doing me a favor. Plate ran to Prescott Dunnar, HOA treasurer, Deline's brother-in-law. That was the moment this whole thing changed flavor, because now it wasn't a pushy neighbor dispute. Now it was criminal property damage with video, and the damaged actuator alone pushed it into felony territory. Holloway ran with it. DA's office got involved. Prescott got a phone call he probably still hears in his sleep. And Deline, instead of backing down, doubled down so hard it was almost admirable in a deranged kind of way. She called an emergency HOA meeting and tried to get the county commissioners to consider turning that strip of my property into a public road. Not for school access, not for emergency response, not because there was any public need, just so her residents could keep shaving a few minutes off their drive. I found out through a retired land surveyor named Elton Briggs who lived nearby and had apparently been watching this whole circus with the kind of interest some men reserve for fishing tournaments and tractor pulls. I met Elton for coffee at a diner in Wagner, and that old man turned out to be the twist in the whole story. Elton had surveyed Sycamore Ridge when it was first platted. Surveyed the Kavanaugh parcel twice, too. He came to breakfast carrying an accordion folder thick with plats, notes, county records, the paper trail of 20 years of land history. Over eggs and coffee so strong it could have stripped paint. He unfolded the Sycamore Ridge plat and pointed to a drainage easement running along the back edge of the development right up against my boundary. Then he slid me county inspection reports showing the HOA had been cited years earlier for failing to maintain the stormwater swale tied to that easement, overgrowth, sediment blockage, insufficient depth, no correction ever properly closed out. I still remember the greasy diner light on that paper, Elton's thick finger resting on the hatched line, and the way my whole view of the fight shifted in one quiet second. Deline had spent months threatening me with legal counsel and community resources. Meanwhile, her HOA was sitting on an unresolved environmental compliance problem that could cost them real money. Real painful, everybody in the neighborhood feels it money. That was when I stopped thinking like a man defending a gate and started thinking like a man dealing with leverage. Around the same time, Deline started trying to poison the town against me. Private Facebook group posts about an outsider ruining the viewshed. Rumors I was planning a commercial trucking yard. Claims I was dumping waste into the creek, which was an outright lie. She even sent a letter to the consulting firm I did part-time work for, calling me unstable and litigious, trying to stain my professional name with the same cheap mud she was slinging online. That was when I called Vashi Okafor, a civil litigator in Tulsa with a mind like a scalpel. She listened for 10 minutes, then said, "Mr. Wolf, this woman is building your case for you." And she was right. Every Facebook post got archived, every screenshot preserved with metadata, every sheriff's report, every case number, every letter, every recording, every county response stacked, dated, organized. I filed a formal complaint with DEQ over the drainage swale. I contacted county planning about the unresolved compliance issue. Quietly, I also started talking with 2 other adjacent landowners Deline had bullied before, a cattle rancher she'd harassed over fencing, and an orchard owner whose permit she'd helped obstruct. Turns out tyrants never only have one victim. They just hope their victims never compare notes. Then Deline made the kind of mistake people make when they've confused getting away with something for being smart. She tried to bribe Elton, sent him a consulting offer to produce an alternative survey, suggesting the drainage area was compliant. Elton read it to me over the phone in that dry gravel voice of his, then sent it straight to the county commissioners. The commissioners passed it to the county attorney. Suddenly, Deline wasn't just juggling a defamation suit, a brother-in-law with a felony case, and a state environmental complaint. She was also under scrutiny for trying to manufacture professional cover. The DEQ inspector came out in early July. Rubber boots, clipboard, unimpressed expression. She walked the swale, photographed the blockages, noted the runoff evidence onto my land, reviewed the past reports, and by the end of it she looked at me and said, "This is significant non-compliance." That sentence cost Sycamore Ridge more than 50 grand before the dust settled. And just when Deline should have realized the walls were closing in, somebody rammed my gate with a truck. Not enough to knock it down. Russ had built that thing like it was guarding Fort Knox, but enough to leave a piece of red bumper trim on the gravel and a beautiful high-definition video of the impact. Another Sycamore Ridge resident, another board-connected name, another sheriff's report. By then the local paper got hold of the story, then television. Then homeowners inside Sycamore Ridge started speaking up because funny thing about bullies, once they start bleeding publicly, everybody finds their courage at once. The big county meeting in September felt less like a hearing and more like the last 10 minutes of a Western. Packed room, stale carpet smell, old coffee. Folks standing along the back wall, everybody pretending not to stare while staring hard. Deline came in dressed like respectability itself. Blazer, straight back, no visor this time. Her attorney sat beside her looking like a man reconsidering every life choice that led him there. One by one, the truth walked to the podium. I laid out the timeline, calm dates only, facts only. Vashi summarized the defamation case. The rancher spoke, the orchard owner spoke. Elton described the bribery letter with the same tone a preacher might use reading out a funeral notice. Then, and this was the moment the air changed, a woman from inside Sycamore Ridge stood up and said, Deline had emailed her a document of talking points for the Facebook smear campaign. Coordinated messaging. Narrative amplification. That was the real phrase. Sounded like something a PR firm would call it if a PR firm had no soul. You could feel the room turn. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a long collective shift, like a floor settling under too much weight. The commissioners moved forward on the compliance issues. The state-level complaints stacked up. Deline walked out to her Escalade afterward and sat inside for 4 solid minutes before pulling away. 4 minutes. Same amount of time she'd started this war over. I won't pretend that wasn't satisfying. The defamation suit settled a few months later for enough money to finish the barnuminium and still leave something left. Prescott took a plea deal. The HOA had to fund drainage remediation. Deline stepped down and did not seek re-election. New board came in suddenly very interested in transparency and community healing, which is small-town code for, we would like this fire to stop spreading now, please. These days the barnuminium's finished. Big porch facing east, steel frame glowing gold in the morning. When I sit out there with coffee, the post oaks catch the sunrise like stained glass, and the creek talks just loud enough in spring to remind me the land is alive, even when the world isn't saying much. That custom gate still closes with that same deep steel clunk, and every time it does, I feel a little piece of peace settle in my chest. I ended up taking part of the settlement and helping fund a small scholarship for rural kids going into land surveying, civil engineering, or environmental science. Because somewhere in the middle of all this, I learned something. I wish more people understood power doesn't always look like money or status or the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes power is a copy of the plat map. Sometimes it's a timestamped photo. Sometimes it's patience, a filing fee, and the discipline to let facts do the hitting for you. That's the bitter little lesson Deline handed me without meaning to. People who abuse small power always believe they're untouchable right up until they run into someone who knows the rules better than they do. Law isn't fast. Kindness isn't weakness, and a thread in a gravel driveway is still just noise if you know where your rights begin and where theirs end. The land is still mine, the gate is still closed, the shortcut is still gone. And I still think about this sometimes. If somebody's been getting away with crossing your line for 15 years, does stopping them count as justice? Or does it feel like revenge? only because they got too comfortable treating your boundaries like they didn't exist. Tell me what you think, who was really in the wrong here, and have you ever had to deal with someone who thought convenience gave them the right to take what wasn't theirs?